Hello, everyone. This is Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com. Today I have another hand from the same $1,000 buy-in tournament I was playing last time. Here we have Queen Jack of Hearts in the cutoff, and a straightforward player raises to 500 at 100, 200 with a 25 ante. I elect to just call in the cutoff versus the middle position raise with Queen Jack of Hearts. I think 3-betting this Queen Jack of Hearts is perfectly acceptable if you feel like being aggressive, but early in tournaments, I'm often just trying to figure out what my opponents are doing, and I'm not necessarily trying to play big pots versus somewhat straightforward players who are going to primarily call 3-bets with hands that dominate me, but will raise with many hands that I dominate, like Jack 10 and stuff like that. So I'm perfectly fine calling here. This hand flops great, and when you have a hand that flops great, you want to see a flop. All right, flop comes King, Queen, 7, 1 heart. And my opponent checks. My opponent is a straightforward player. So when he checks, what does that mean? Typically, straightforward players are betting with all their hands they perceive to have value. So which hands have value here? I think a lot of kings obviously have value, so we can really discount kings. Obviously, sets and 2 pairs would most likely bet. So when my opponent does not bet, he probably either has a queen, which I beat most of, but notice he's probably only raising queen 10 and maybe queen 9. And then a lot of middle pocket pairs. So if he does have a middle pocket pair, or perhaps a hand like 8-7, will he call if I bet the flop? I think he probably will call one bet with those hands, but at the same time, if I check behind on the flop, and then he bets the turn, well, I can easily call. And if he checks the turn, well, then I just know I can bet for value. It's very obvious I should be betting for value in that scenario. So I think this is a spot where there is a lot of value in checking behind, with the intention of value betting the turn if he continues to check. Because if he checks twice, it's just obvious I have the best hand. One thing you really want to do whenever your opponent has a marginal hand is let him think that his hand is best. And the way you do that is by often foregoing a little bit of value immediately in exchange for making his range appear stronger in his mind and getting additional value on the turn and perhaps even the river. So I like checking behind here. Turns a 4, complete blank. Our opponent checks again. And like I said, when he checks again, now it's pretty clear to me he has either total garbage or a marginal made hand, primarily pocket pairs, or maybe a 7, or maybe a weaker queen like queen 9 or queen 10. So he checks, and I decide to bet 800 into this 1,500 pot, which I think is a pretty nice sizing because, again, which hands are we trying to get called by, right? We're trying to get called by middle pocket pairs and ace highs. And those hands will often not call a very large bet in this scenario. So I like this bet. I think this is a nice sizing that's going to get called by the range I'm trying to get called by. Versus amateur players in particular, you always want to size your bet such that it can realistically get called. So on the river is a 4, so it's king, queen, 7, 4, 4. My opponent checks again. And this is where I think I perhaps messed up a little bit in this tournament versus this straightforward player, just because this player is straightforward. If he was good, tricky, aggressive, I think checking behind is fine. But against a straightforward player, I think I need to go for value. And that's just because this straightforward player virtually never has a king. And even if he does have a king, it's going to be so rare. The main time you do not want to value bet this river is when you know a lot about your opponent and you know that he is going to fold unless he has a queen or better. And also, if you think he's going to be checking with kings on the flop, looking to check call, which a lot of people are starting to do in today's games because they're realizing continuation betting very often is not necessarily the best strategy when people don't fold too often. So you want to balance your checking range by checking some of your top pairs. So anyway, versus the generic straightforward player in a $1,000 buy-in tournament, I think I should have just gone for value. And I don't think I bet for value. Let's see if I did. I would like to bet for value here, probably about 1,200. Oh, I did bet 1,400. Never mind. I was confused. I was going to say, I think this is a good spot to bet small because, again, we're trying to get called by middle pocket pairs, ace, jack, stuff like that. So good. I'm glad I bet this because I thought I checked it behind. Again, the main time you don't want to be checking, or the main time you want to check behind is when your opponent could have a lot of kings, or when he's always going to fold out pocket jacks and worse, in which case you're not getting value from very many hands at all. So I do bet 1,400. This might be a little bit big. Pot's 1,000 or pot's 3,100, and I think as you start betting bigger, like 1,700 or 2,500, you run the risk of your opponent folding out a lot of the hands that you're trying to get value from. So again, especially against amateur players who don't notice what you're doing with your bet sizes or may not really care what you're doing with your bet sizes, you should be somewhat inclined to vary your bet wildly based on the hands you're trying to get called by. But again, if you misassess your opponent and they actually understand what you're doing, they're going to realize that your small bets are clearly for value and they're going to fold appropriately. Or they may even check raise. That would be a disaster. If I did get check raise on this river, I would have folded, clearly, because this guy, in my mind, is straightforward, right? If he check raised and I had him labeled as tricky, well, then we may have a much closer call. So that's going to be it for this week. I want to thank you all for being here. If you enjoyed this video, let the people at Poker News know. Be sure to check back next week for another one. Thanks for watching.